When he was summoned to another world, he thought he'd gain heroic powers. But instead of brute strength, he ends up with something else, the rare ability to rewrite skills themselves. It doesn't just alter abilities, it changes the entire system and the fate of others. In a world where power rules, he becomes a symbol of hope for the weak. Can he truly reshape this world, or will the system crush him first? That's where the story begins. A system notification appears. Time limit, 10 minutes. Choose 3 skill embryos. Takumi wakes up in a white room. He's surrounded by a group of confused people, all murmuring about the system message and trying to pick their skills. One man shouts in panic, demanding to know why they're trapped and threatening to call the police. The crowd inside the room is shaken and clueless. Panic spreads. Someone screams. Someone collapses. Some people were already trying to adapt to the system. Meanwhile, the main character grew more and more frustrated as he waited for things to begin. The people around him made no sense. Useless. Still, he decided to find out what kind of skills everyone was so focused on. Takumi started to question where they were. What kind of place was this, really? He remembered leaving the office and heading to the train station. But after that, everything became a blur, drowned out by the sound of the screaming crowd. People were arguing over the skill embryos. They couldn't agree. Those who picked first got better ones. Not fully understanding what this place was or what was happening, Takumi decided it was time to choose his own skill embryos. Opening the list, he noticed others had already picked magic, attack, time, and space skills. It felt like watching players pick cheat codes in a game. But Takumi paused. These weren't actual skills, they were just the seeds of them. These were the elements from which actual skills would be formed. Could they be combined? Maybe it was smarter to pick something more flexible. Only 3 minutes remained. No time to hesitate. The number of people in the room was shrinking fast. Now, more than ever, the main character had to focus. The remaining skill embryos appeared on the main screen in front of him. It was decision time. What he had left were brush, contact, and claws. He started to think what kind of abilities could help him break through the limits. Maybe contact was the right pick. But then, only 2 skills were left. Nearly everything had been taken already. The main character was overwhelmed. What should he choose? The clock was ticking. He had no time to second guess. The fear hit him if he picked wrong. He might end up as the weakest one here. And this world might be far harsher than he expected. There was almost no time left, just 1 minute. And on the screen in front of him, the same 3 embryos remained. Desperate, he shouted at the screen, begging the system to give him a different skill embryo. He pleaded for a chance to pick something else. But it was already too late to change course. Only 10 seconds remained. He was panicking. Clenching his teeth, hissing in frustration, he kept asking for a new option. But the countdown kept going. Nothing new showed up. He frantically scrolled through the talent list, hoping something would appear. But time ran out. The transition began. His eyes widened with panic. He wasn't ready. He still hadn't decided. He just needed a little more time. But it was over. Everything went black, the darkness swallowing him completely. The first thing he saw after the transition, the tops of trees. He had awakened, and his first thought was, where is this place? This is a forest, he realized. Turning his head slightly, he noticed a girl sitting beside him unconscious. She was very close enough for him to see her features clearly. She had long ears. Maybe she wasn't human. He scanned the area, trying to take in the forest around him, hoping to understand what lay beyond that strange white room. But soon, his eyes returned to the girl. He spotted a wound on her body and moved closer to check her condition. It wasn't clear if she was okay. Suddenly, she woke up only to find a stranger leaning over her. Alarmed, she asked who he was. Takumi, he answered, introducing himself. The girl looked weak. Grabbing Takumi's hand gently, she said she just needed rest, and everything would be all right. Then, she placed something into his hand. Takumi stared at her, listening carefully. She mentioned something about elves. He was shocked, eyes wide open. Then suddenly, he woke up again, in a room. Lying on the bed, Takumi couldn't tell if everything that happened was real or just a dream. He got up and walked to the mirror only to see a completely different person staring back at him. A scream, shock, total confusion. Who was this person in the reflection? What had happened to him? Was this all part of the transition? Could this be his new avatar? Takumi tried to figure out who he had become. He pinched his own face to check if he was dreaming. How old was he now? Just then, the talisman the girl in the forest gave him fell to the floor. Seeing it reminded him of her, and he thought he needed to return it. Still standing in the middle of the room, he decided to check his status. He wanted to open the talent embryos and see which ones he ended up with from the white room and figure out what to do next. But no matter how hard he tried to summon the system window, no matter how much he shouted or waved his hands, nothing happened. Takumi couldn't figure out what was wrong. Why wasn't it working? Where was he supposed to check his skill embryos? Frustrated, he grabbed his head and slumped down. It felt like a total failure. Then suddenly, the screen appeared in front of him. His skills were now visible. He was shocked. These weren't the skills he had chosen himself, they had already been picked by others. But now he understood how to check his status. All he had to do was place his hand over his eyes. He decided to step outside and look around. There was a tall fence surrounding the area, clearly meant to protect him from something outside. As he tried to gather his thoughts, a voice called out behind him. It greeted him and explained that this place was the village of Rosetta. Turning around, Takumi saw an old man. It was the village elder. His name was Zil. Takumi politely introduced himself and said he was glad to meet him. He explained that he had just woken up and somehow ended up here. The elder told him not to worry. People who came through those gates were just like him, outsiders from another world. The main character asked again, "People from another world?" Zil nodded and explained that others like him had appeared 5 years ago. Takumi was stunned. 5 years? How could that much time have passed without him realizing it? He asked Zil what he needed to do to survive in this world. The village chief pointed him toward a building and told him to head there first. Takumi walked to the structure, where the words "Adventurers Guild" were written above the entrance. From behind the door, a voice welcomed him. Standing at the entrance, he was greeted by the guild master Hana. She looked surprised to see a new face. After learning that he wasn't from this world, she asked him to list his origin as the village of Rosetta. Hana handed Takumi some papers to fill out. He had to choose a profession. The text on the paper was written in a different language, but somehow, to his surprise, he could understand every word. Still, he couldn't decide which profession to pick. Hana asked what kind of skill embryos he had. Takumi sank into thought, trying to piece it all together. He realized that only skills tied to embryos would actually appear. So, he had to choose a profession that matched well with the embryos he had. That's when an idea suddenly clicked in his mind, an epiphany. But before he could think deeper, Hana's voice snapped him back to reality. She warned him, once he picked a profession, he couldn't change it. That made him panic a little. He quickly went over his skill embryos again, contact, change, text, and started thinking hard about which profession could work with those. After about 5 minutes, Hana finished preparing Takumi's personal card. She looked at it and said she had never heard of a profession like his before. Takumi took the card, flipped it over, and read the title printed on the back. His profession, systems engineer. It actually made sense, it fit perfectly with the skill embryos he had chosen. Hana smiled and handed him the tools and gear needed for his new role. She even gave him a small gift, saying he didn't have to return it. Takumi felt nothing but gratitude. He was honestly happy. By the time he left the guild, night had already fallen. He made his way back to the place where he had woken up that morning. For now, it was a relief to have a place he could stay. He sat down on the bed, picked up the knife Hana had given him, and wondered what to do next. Then, he got to work starting with developing his skills. He used his contact skill on the knife, hoping to pull up detailed information about the object. Takumi then converted the information from the knife into text and read it. To his surprise, it worked. He had done it. Next, he used his change talent to increase the knife's attack power from 3 to 9. It worked again. While experimenting with the knife, he started to understand how skills are actually created. As a result, he unlocked 2 new abilities: forgery and analysis. He figured out something important. The forgery skill only worked on single symbols. No kanji, no English, just one character at a time. Still, it made him stronger. He tested the skill again, this time on stones, raising their attack power from 1 to 9. Then he began going on hunts, fighting goblins and slugs. On one of his trips, after defeating a goblin, he noticed something drop from the creature. It was a magic stone. He remembered hearing that these could be sold at the store. 3 days later, Takumi ran into Hana again. This time, she wasn't alone. She smiled and said, "Just in time," then introduced the man beside her. His name was Harry. Harry explained that he had taught another person from another world, someone who arrived 5 years ago, just like Takumi. "If you need information," Harry said, "feel free to ask." Takumi hesitated. He wasn't sure how to begin the conversation, but eventually, he asked the question on his mind. He wanted to know, where do people from another world go once they leave this village? Harry replied that they usually head west, to a large city called Barceli. It's the place where those aiming to defeat the Lord of Darkness gather. Takumi's eyes widened. "The Lord of Darkness?" he repeated, startled. The name sent a chill down his spine. A thought immediately hit him: do I really have to defeat the Lord of Darkness just to return home? He asked Harry, "What profession did the person from 5 years ago choose?" Harry said the man had been a pharmacist, and even in his old world, he had worked with medicine. Hearing that, Takumi felt a little relieved. So maybe defeating the Lord of Darkness isn't the only way out. That thought actually lifted Takumi's spirits a bit. Feeling hopeful, he decided to ask Harry about skill embryos. Harry brought him to a house, then suddenly stopped, spun around, and said in a serious tone, "You can't go any further. If you do, they'll kill you." Takumi froze. His body went stiff. His face went pale. The words hit him like a slap. Back at his shelter, he collapsed onto the bed, replaying Harry's warning over and over in his mind. Just asking about skill embryos is dangerous. He began to piece it together. If someone knows your skill embryo and your profession, they can pretty much figure out your abilities. That kind of info could put a target on your back. But still, he needed to talk to others from another world. Without them, he felt lost. So for now, he decided to lay low and focus on preparing. He grabbed a white linen shirt and, using his change talent, modified the info tag on it, switching the material to silk and adding the origin, city of Barceli. Just like that, Takumi arrived at Barceli. Takumi stood in awe, right in the middle of the massive city, quietly watching the locals as they passed by. The trip here had taken 2 full days, but everything went smoothly, probably because he'd leveled up a bit along the way. Level up. Magic stones. He planned to sell them now, but the streets were packed. Too crowded. That's when someone suddenly called out to him. A man approached and asked where the unfamiliar face had come from. Takumi answered, "From the village of Rosetta." But to the man, it sounded like total gibberish. The man squinted at him, then blurted out just one word, "Frank," before bursting into loud laughter. He jabbed a finger at Takumi, clearly mocking him. An F rank? Coming to Barceli to make money? Ridiculous. The man added that if Takumi were just 1 rank higher E rank, he would have already died. Takumi clenched his jaw, clearly annoyed. He didn't even try to hide it. This old man really pissed him off. Meanwhile, it was finally Takumi's turn to sell the magic stones he'd collected from killing goblins. The shopkeeper looked at the pile and said he'd brought in quite a lot. Takumi cracked a small smile. Nothing impressive, it was just 2 days worth of hunting. But right behind him stood that same old man, still annoying him just by being there. The man glanced at Takumi from the side and muttered, "Not bad, for an F rank." Then he turned to a man in a hat standing nearby. "Hey Hiroshi," the old man said, "do you think this guy would be useful to us?" Hiroshi didn't even hesitate. "Nah, we don't need someone who just throws stuff from a distance." The old man growled under his breath, saying yesterday's goods had already turned to dust just as useless. Still standing in line, Takumi clenched his fists in anger. He glared at Hiroshi, thinking to himself, that guy probably has some kind of analysis skill. But Takumi had a trick up his sleeve, his newly acquired camouflage skill. It was working. No one could see his true profession. All anyone saw was a fake name. Takumi, development, thrower, skill embryos, run, bend, throw, skill, throwing. At the store, the stone buyer told him he'd done a lot for someone with an F rank and asked if they were going to promote him. At first, Takumi was interested, but then he shut the conversation down, saying maybe another time. He left the shop, clearly not enjoying the company of these people. He was exhausted and just wanted to sleep early. What he didn't notice was that someone had started following him. As he walked, a voice called out from behind. Someone asked if he had a minute. He turned around and replied. Standing there was a mysterious girl in a black cloak that hid most of her face. She suddenly invited him to join her group. There was an awkward silence. Takumi wasn't sure how to respond. Then, out of nowhere, the girl blurted out, "Please, please." She looked desperate. You could hear the desperation in every word she spoke. Takumi asked who she was and told her to calm down. She quickly apologized, explaining that she couldn't find anyone to team up with. She was clearly flustered and unsure of what to do next. When he asked if she had any family, she quietly said no. She revealed that she had only arrived in this world 3 days ago. Apparently, people refused to form a party with her once they saw the skill, embryo, and profession she ended up with. As she poured her story out, Takumi couldn't help but think she was just like him, another person dragged into this strange world. He told her that he was genuinely curious to hear what kind of stories other people from his world had. After a short pause, the girl invited him to sit down, grab a bite, and chat for a while. She even offered to pay if he agreed. He said yes, and the girl, clearly overjoyed, started talking a mile a minute. She mentioned she hadn't eaten anything since yesterday and promised to tell him everything she knew. A new city, a quiet park, the sound of the fountain nearby, and this strange girl munching on cookies like it was the best meal of her life. Takumi found the whole scene oddly amusing. She devoured the cookies and thanked him sincerely. It was like she came back to life right before his eyes, and that made him genuinely happy. They sat on the bench in silence for a bit while she continued eating. Then, he finally introduced himself and warned her that he had a question one she might not like, and she was free to skip answering. He took a breath and just asked it outright. Could she tell him about her profession, her skills, and the skill embryos she had? The question froze the moment. She stopped chewing and just stared at the cookies in her hand. Feeling a little awkward, Takumi tried to explain he was just curious and thought maybe he could help her somehow. After a pause, she looked up and agreed, calling him her benefactor. Turns out, she used to study at an art university, an actual artist. It had been her dream to receive a talent related to her passion, and she did. But in reality, it was completely useless for fighting monsters. Takumi was taken aback and asked if she had at least tried using the deformation skill. She nodded. Yes, she had. Apparently, she could bring any idea to life through her drawings. That made Takumi sit up straight. Any idea? He asked, half shouting. He got up from the bench, turned toward her, and offered his help. Would she let him use his skills on her? The girl lowered her head, hands folded tightly in her lap, and quietly said how difficult things had been since arriving in this world. She was scared, really scared, but she couldn't keep going like this. If nothing changed, she'd starve. Finally, she gathered her courage, looked him in the eye, and asked him to use all the skills he had on her. He smiled the moment she agreed. Gently, he sat her down on the bench, stood beside her, and took her hand. She looked confused, didn't get what he was trying to do. She even tried to pull away, but he held her hand firmly and pressed it to his eyes. "Just stay like this for 5 minutes," he said. It was the only way he could really help. Using his analysis skill, he scanned her status and finally learned her name Mia and everything she was capable of. Then, with the forgery skill, he altered her status. Done. He looked at her and suggested they test out her new abilities. Mia nodded. He handed her a small branch and told her to picture it growing like in an anime, big, exaggerated, over the top. She blinked, then nodded again, catching on. And just like that, the little branch swelled in size before their eyes. Mia stared in awe. Her new deformation skill actually worked. She stared at the giant branch, focused, and imagined it shrinking. Just like that, it shrank back to its normal size. Magic. Takumi, impressed, told her everything would be fine now and turned to leave. But of course, she stopped him. She was still lost. How was she supposed to make money with this skill? He explained, plain and simple. With a skill like that, any adventurer group would take her in, no questions asked. She squealed, but not with joy. No, she was convinced that wasn't good enough. Takumi, ever the reluctant life coach, tried to calm her down. "Don't worry," he said. "You'll be in demand." And she believed him. For a second. Then, like clockwork, the idea of forming a team together popped into her head again. Takumi immediately shut it down. He liked being a lone wolf. But she wasn't giving up. She begged him to make a new group with her, practically pleaded. When the tears started flowing, he caved. Because of course he did. Takumi stepped closer to Mia, raised an eyebrow, and asked if she was really sure he was the right pick for her party. She beamed and hit him with a confident yes. Fast forward to the Adventurers Guild, both of them standing in front of the bulletin board, reading off the party names and available quests like it was a job fair. Takumi, in his ever-practical tone, suggested they go for an E-rank quest. That's when Mia practically exploded. No way could she handle that. She couldn't even take down a goblin, she said, and then spiraled into flashbacks of the Barceli crowd laughing at her sorry rank. Mood? Crushed. But Takumi wasn't done yet. He leaned in like a magician, revealing his grand trick, and told her he had just the thing, a secret weapon. Then, with flair, he handed her a bag. They hit up the store and got themselves shiny new ID cards, official, fresh, and stamped with their brand new status, E-rank adventurers. Just like that, their chaotic duo had a title, a rank, and the start of a ridiculous new journey.